The live stream on my iPad displayed a perfect Oregon vineyard sunset. Yet all I felt was the stale chill of a Phoenix hotel room. On screen, my brother raised a glass next to his influencer bride, announcing to thousands that he had not invited his controlling sister because he had chosen a new family. As comments cheering for my exclusion scrolled by, I did not cry. I simply reached for my laptop and opened the encrypted file I had kept hidden for 10 years. My name is Nina Valdez. I am 34 years old, and my job as the Chief Risk Officer for Northwind Freight Systems usually involves predicting disasters before they happen. I spend my days analyzing supply chain fractures, fuel surcharges, and liability clauses, ensuring that when things break, the company does not bleed. I am paid to see the train wreck coming miles away. But that Tuesday night, sitting in a generic hotel suite in downtown Phoenix, with the hum of the industrial air conditioning rattling against the window pane, I did not see the collision coming until the metal was already shearing through my skin. It started with a vibration on the bedside table, a text message from Jessica, a girl I had known since our scholarship days at university. We had not spoken in 6 months, not since I had canceled our last lunch date to bail my brother out of a tenant dispute. The message was short, brutal, and devoid of pleasantries. You need to see this, right now. Below it sat a hyperlink. No context, no warning, just a blue string of text that looked like a trap. I sat up, the stiff hotel sheets pooling around my waist. My iPad was propped against the ice bucket, displaying a half-finished quarterly risk assessment, but my fingers moved on autopilot to open the link. The screen flashed white, then dissolved into a warm, filtered gold. It was a live stream. The scene was breathtakingly expensive. I recognized the aesthetic immediately because I had paid the deposit for a venue just like it 2 years ago, before that engagement fell apart. But this was not my wedding. It was a vineyard in Oregon, bathed in the specific, heavy amber light of the magic hour. The time of day photographers worshipped because it made everything look like a dream. Strung Edison bulbs glittered overhead like captured fireflies. There were rustic barrels topped with overflowing arrangements of white peonies and eucalyptus. It was perfect. It was calculated. It was an Instagram advertisement come to life. And there, standing in the center of the frame, was my brother, Ian. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him poorly across the shoulders, the fabric straining slightly as he shifted his weight. His tie was loose, a detail that made my fingers twitch with the phantom urge to reach through the screen and fix it. He looked handsome in a rugged, boyish way, the way he always looked when he was about to ask me for a loan. But he was not looking at me. He was looking adoringly at the woman holding his hand. Savannah Cole. My new sister-in-law was glowing. She wore a bohemian lace gown that probably cost more than my first car, her blonde hair cascading in carefully constructed beach waves. She was holding a microphone, her other hand resting possessively on Ian's chest. Savannah was an influencer, a woman who had built a following of 50,000 people by preaching about boundaries, self-care, and the art of cutting toxic people out of your life. I had never followed her, but Ian sent me her videos constantly, usually when he was trying to explain why he could not get a traditional job. I turned the volume up. The tinny speakers of the iPad filled the silent hotel room with her breathless, curated voice. We just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who is here physically and spiritually, Savannah said, looking directly into the camera lens. She knew exactly where the lens was. She knew exactly how to tilt her chin to catch the best light. This journey hasn't been easy. We have had to fight for our peace. We have had to fight for our love. She paused for effect. A ripple of sympathetic murmurs went through the crowd behind her. I scanned the guests. I saw Ian's old college roommate. I saw a cousin from our father's side who I had not seen in 5 years. I saw people I had fed, people I had driven to airports, people I had sent birthday checks to. There have been a lot of questions about why our wedding is so intimate, Savannah continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Why certain family members aren't here today. My stomach turned over. A slow, cold revolution. We decided that we only wanted energy that supports us, she said, her grip tightening on Ian's lapel. We are breaking cycles today. We are saying no to manipulation. We are saying no to people who think their money gives them the right to control our lives. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they own you. I stopped breathing. The air in the hotel room seemed to vanish. She turned to Ian. The camera zoomed in, capturing the raw devotion in his eyes. He looked like a man who had finally found religion. "Ian," she said softly, "tell them, baby." Ian laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that I knew better than my own heartbeat. He scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, Savannah is right. It was hard, you know? But I didn't invite my sister because my wife doesn't want her there." He looked at the camera then. For a second, our eyes locked across 2,000 miles of fiber optics. "I chose my new family," Ian said. His voice was steady. It was the steadiest I had heard him sound in years. "I'm done being made to feel small just because I don't have a corporate title. I am choosing love." The crowd erupted. Applause. Cheers. Someone shouted, "Good for you, man!" I looked down at the chat box scrolling rapidly on the side of the screen. User 789. "Yes's queen. Cut that toxicity out. Live, love, laugh. Financial abuse is real abuse. So proud of you both." Debbie D. "I had a sister like that. Thought she could buy my kids just because she paid for school. Bye, Felicia." Mikey T. "That sister sounds like a nightmare. You dodged a bullet. Bro." Hundreds of hearts, hundreds of thumbs-up emojis, hundreds of strangers applauding the public execution of my character. To them, I was not a person. I was a trope. I was the bitter, controlling, spinster sister who used her checkbook as a leash. I was the villain in their romantic comedy. I sat absolutely still. I was aware of the physical sensations of my body in a detached, clinical way. My heart rate had slowed down, thumping with a heavy, deliberate rhythm against my ribs. My hands were cold. The room smelled of industrial lavender detergent and stale coffee. Outside the window, the Phoenix skyline blinked indifferently. They were drinking champagne now. Ian was laughing, throwing his head back, looking lighter than I had ever seen him. He looked free. I thought about the suit he was wearing. I had bought it for him 3 years ago for a job interview he never showed up to. I thought about the teeth he was flashing in that smile. I had paid $4,000 for his dental work when he was 22 and had gotten into a bar fight. I thought about the phone in his pocket. It was on a family plan that was auto-paid from my checking account on the 1st of every month. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, like a rib snapping inward. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot. Anger moves fast. This was something else. This was the sensation of a foundation crumbling. For 14 years, since our mother died in that sterile hospital hallway, I had built my entire identity around being the scaffolding that held Ian Blake upright. I was the safety net. I was the bank. I was the fixer. And he had just taken a pair of shears and cut the net, while the whole world watched and cheered. "I chose my new family," he had said. The words echoed in the empty hotel room. I reached out and touched the volume button. The sound cut off instantly. The cheering stopped. Savannah's moving lips became silent pantomime. Ian's laughter became a mute grimace. I did not close the window. I did not turn off the screen. I left them there, dancing and toasting in the golden silence of my iPad. Slowly, with the deliberate movements of someone navigating a bomb site, I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out my laptop. It was a heavy, enterprise-grade machine, built for processing massive datasets. I opened it. The fan whirred to life, a comforting, mechanical sound. I bypassed my work email. I bypassed the quarterly reports. I navigated to a folder hidden deep within a nested directory of system archives, a folder I had named System Config Logs, to ensure no casual observer would ever click on it. Inside was a single Excel file. I had created it 5 years ago, at 3 a.m, after Ian had crashed my car and told me it was my fault for buying a vehicle with too much horsepower. I had created it as a therapy exercise, a way to quantify the unquantifiable weight of my obligation. I had never intended to open it for real. It was just a safety valve, a theoretical exercise in risk management. I typed in the password. It was 20 characters long. The file opened. Exit strategy Ian. Rows and rows of data populated the screen. Dates, dollar amounts, contract numbers, asset tags, tax ID numbers. I looked at the live stream one last time. Ian was kissing Savannah. It was a long, performative kiss, meant for the audience. He looked so happy. He looked so safe. He truly believed that the ground beneath his feet was solid rock, formed by his own charisma and his wife's positive affirmations. He had no idea that he was standing on a floor made entirely of my bank transfers. I looked back at the spreadsheet. The cursor blinked in the first cell. A steady, rhythmic pulse. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a clarity as sharp and cold as a scalpel. I was not the villain, I was the bank. And the bank was about to call in the loan. The smell of a hospital is something you never truly scrub out of your olfactory memory. It is a specific cocktail of industrial bleach, stale cafeteria coffee, and the metallic tang of fear. I was 20 years old when that scent branded itself into my brain. I was a junior in college, worrying about a macroeconomics midterm, when I should have been worrying about the fact that my mother's heart was failing. We were in the cardiac wing of St. Jude's, a place where hope went to sit in uncomfortable plastic chairs and wait for bad news. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sound that felt like a drill against my temple. My mother, Maria, looked so small in that bed. She had always been a force of nature, a woman who could stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 dinners and still make it taste like a feast. Now, she was just a fragile outline under a thin white sheet. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin and cold. "Nina," she whispered. Her voice was wet and rattling. "Where is Ian?" Ian was 14. He was sitting in the lobby playing a Game Boy, unable to look at the tubes and wires. I told her he was coming. "Listen to me," she said, her grip tightening with a surprising, desperate strength. "You have to promise me. You are the strong one. You have always been the strong one. You have to take care of him. He only has you." I looked at her, my throat tight with a sob I refused to let out. "I know, Mama. We'll be okay." "Promise me," she insisted, her eyes wide and terrified, staring not at me, but through me to a future she knew she would not see. "Promise me you will never let him fall. He is your blood. You keep him safe." "I promise," I said. I said it so easily. 2 words. I promise. I signed the verbal contract without reading the terms and conditions, without understanding that I was mortgaging the next decade and a half of my life. I thought I was agreeing to be a supportive sister. I did not know I was agreeing to become a human shield. She died 4 hours later. Our father lasted 2 weeks. He did not die. He simply evaporated. The grief was too heavy, the house too quiet, and the responsibility of a teenage son too daunting. He met a woman at a bar who laughed at his jokes and didn't remind him of death, and he followed her to Florida. He left a note on the kitchen counter and $300 in an envelope. That was the moment my childhood ended. It did not fade away. It was severed. I dropped out of the sorority. I picked up 3 shifts a week at a diner and 2 at the university library. I learned to sleep in 4-hour intervals. My 20s were not a blur of parties and self-discovery. They were a blur of utility bills, parent-teacher conferences for a brother who was not my son, and the constant, grinding panic of running out of money. I remember driving Ian to school in my rusted '98 sedan. The heater was broken, and in the brutal Midwestern winter, we could see our breath inside the car. Ian would complain about the cold, about how embarrassing the car was, about how he couldn't get the new sneakers the other kids had. I never told him that I was skipping lunch every day to pay for his trumpet lessons. I never told him that the scholarship he thought covered his band trip was actually me selling my grandmother's jewelry. "I promise," I had said. So I worked. I graduated with honors. Not because I was brilliant, but because I was terrified of poverty. I clawed my way into an entry-level accounting job. I took the night classes to get my certification. I took the risk management seminars that no one else wanted to attend because they were dry and tedious. I learned that risk was just math. If you could calculate the exposure, you could control the damage. But I never calculated the exposure of loving Ian. There is a specific memory that haunts me. It was Ian's high school graduation. I sat in the bleachers of the gymnasium, surrounded by families, moms, dads, grandparents, siblings. I was alone. I was 24, wearing a suit I had bought at a thrift store, looking 10 years older than I was. When they called his name, I stood up and screamed. I clapped until my palms stung. I wanted to make enough noise for 2 parents and a sister. Ian walked across the stage, took his diploma, and didn't look up. He was looking at his friends. Later, he told me he was embarrassed that I was the only one there. He said I was trying too hard. That became the dynamic. I was the safety net, and he was the trapeze artist who refused to practice. When he was 22, he wanted to start a custom t-shirt business. It failed in 6 months. I paid off the supplier debt, $7,000. When he was 25, he got into a minor fender bender with an uninsured car. I paid the settlement to keep it off his record, $3,000. When he was 28, he had the visionary idea for a tech startup that involved connecting dog walkers with cryptocurrency. He cried on my couch, telling me this was his big break, that he just needed seed money, that he would pay me back with interest. He looked so much like Mom when he cried, the same dark eyes, the same desperate tilt of the chin. I wrote a check for $20,000. I took it out of my 401k, paying the early withdrawal penalty. He never launched the app. He went to Bali for 3 months to find his creative center. As I rose through the ranks at Northwind Freight Systems, becoming the youngest director and then the chief risk officer, I stopped telling Ian about the work. I didn't tell him about the ulcers. I didn't tell him about the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if a fuel strike in Venezuela would bankrupt my department. I didn't tell him that my success was built on a foundation of anxiety so thick it felt like concrete. To him, I was just lucky. I was rich. I was the endless resource. Then came Savannah. She appeared 2 years ago, a whirlwind of beige linen and passive-aggressive spirituality. She was a content creator. Her brand was detox. She made videos about cutting out preservatives, cutting out gluten, and eventually, cutting out people. The first time I met her, I took them to dinner at a steakhouse in Denver. Ian ordered the most expensive ribeye. Savannah ordered a salad and spent 20 minutes lecturing the waiter about the sourcing of the arugula. "Ian tells me you work in logistics," she said, looking at me with a pitying smile. "That sounds so stressful, so masculine. Do you ever make time to align your chakras?" "I align supply chains," I said, trying to be polite. "It pays the mortgage." "Money is just energy," she said, waving a hand adorned with rings I suspected Ian had charged to the emergency credit card I gave him. "If you hold on to it too tight, you block the flow. You have to release it to receive it." I watched them that night. I saw the way Ian looked at her, like she was a priestess who held the keys to his salvation. She told him that his failures weren't his fault. She told him the world was rigged against dreamers. She told him that anyone who demanded accountability was actually stifling his vibration. It annoyed me. It sat in my gut like a stone, but I remembered the hospital room. He only has you. So I stayed silent. I paid for the dinner. I paid for the Uber they took home. I continued to pay the rent on the loft where they lived, telling myself it was just until Ian got back on his feet. I let them paint me as the rigid, uncool, checkbook-wielding sister because I thought that was the price of keeping the family together. I thought that if I just gave enough, forgave enough, and stayed quiet enough, eventually Ian would grow up and thank me. But sitting in that Phoenix hotel room, with the silence of the live stream pressing against my ears, the truth finally crystallized. My wife doesn't want you there. That wasn't just Savannah manipulating him. That was Ian. He had not just accepted her narrative. He had weaponized it. They had taken my sacrifice. The years of night shifts, the skipped meals, the delayed dreams, and they had twisted it. My support was now control. My concern was now toxicity. My financial safety net was now a tool of oppression. They had built a fortress of positivity using bricks that I had paid for, and then they had locked the gate to keep me out. I looked at the black screen of the iPad. The file on my laptop screen was still open. The cursor blinked next to a row labeled Tuition, Sophomore Year. I wasn't a sister anymore. I wasn't a mother figure anymore. To them, I was just a resource they had finished mining. And the thing about resources is that they eventually run dry. I thought about my mother. I thought about her desperate, dying wish. Take care of him. I had taken care of him. I had kept him alive. I had kept him out of jail. I had kept him fed. But I realized now that I had made a mistake. I had promised to protect Ian from the world, but I had never promised to protect him from himself. And I certainly never promised to let him destroy me. I closed my eyes and let the ghost of that hospital room fade away. When I opened them, the guilt was gone. It was replaced by the cold, hard calm of a risk officer who has finally decided to cut a losing asset. The blue light of the laptop screen was the only thing illuminating the hotel room, casting long, sharp shadows against the wall. I did not look at the live stream on the iPad. I kept it running in the peripheral vision of my desk, a silent, moving collage of joy that I was paying for. But my focus was entirely on the spreadsheet in front of me. Exit Strategy Ian, XLSX. It was a masterstroke of forensic accounting, a document I had built during a bout of insomnia 3 years ago. At the time, Ian had just defaulted on a micro-loan I had co-signed, and I needed to reassure myself that I had some form of leverage, even if I never intended to use it. Now, the file looked less like a coping mechanism and more like a weapon waiting to be loaded. I scrolled through the tabs. The data was cold, precise, and damning. Tab 1. Real estate assets. Row 4 detailed the loft in downtown Denver. It was a 2-bedroom industrial conversion with exposed brick and skylights, located in the most expensive district of the city, on paper. The tenant was Ian Blake. In reality, the lease was held by Valdez Holdings, LLC, a shell company I had established solely for tax liability purposes. I paid the rent, the utilities, the internet, and the renter's insurance. Ian had signed a guest occupancy agreement 5 years ago, a document he probably didn't even read, assuming it was just another piece of paper his annoying sister made him sign. Legally, he was not a tenant with rights. He was a guest who had overstayed his welcome by 60 months. Tab 2. Movable assets. Row 12 listed a vehicle. The Thunder Cruiser EV. It was a massive, aggressive electric pickup truck that retailed for nearly $90,000. Ian had begged for it, claiming he needed a rugged vehicle for his image as an entrepreneur. I had purchased it through Northwind Freight Systems as a fleet vehicle, assigning it to a remote consultant role that Ian technically filled on paper but never performed. The registration, the insurance, and the title were all in the company's name. Ian drove it, washed it, and posted pictures of it, but he owned it in the same way a valet owns the Ferrari he parks. Tab 3. Revolving credit lines. This was the bloodiest tab. It tracked the American Express Platinum business card, ending in 4099. Ian was an authorized user. I reviewed the transaction history for the last quarter. It was a hemorrhage of capital. Groceries at Whole Foods, business lunches at sushi restaurants that cost $400, a flight to Cabo that he claimed was for networking, and now, the wedding expenses, the flowers, the deposit for the vineyard, the suit he was wearing right now. At the bottom of the summary sheet, in bright red text, sat a block of cells I had labeled Asset Recovery Protocol. It was a theoretical flowchart. Step 1. Revoke digital access. Step 2. Repossess physical keys. Step 3. Report assets as misappropriated. I had written it as a fantasy. It was the financial equivalent of imagining punching someone in the face, something you think about to relieve stress, but never actually do. I stared at the red text. The cursor hovered over the cell. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, the sound jarring in the silence. It was an email notification. The sender was Elias Monroe. Elias was my personal attorney, and the only person on earth who knew the full extent of the financial web I had spun around my brother. He was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who viewed emotion as a liability in contract law. The subject line was clear: Security alert. Residential camera 04. My heart hammered a strange, uneven rhythm. I clicked the notification. Elias had not written any text in the body of the email. There was only a video attachment and a request for a call. I downloaded the file. It was a clip from the security system I had installed in my Denver home 6 months ago, a system Ian knew about, but clearly did not respect. The timestamp was from 3 days ago, Tuesday, 11 in the morning. The camera angle was high, capturing the entirety of my living room. The room was pristine, quiet, and empty. Then, the front door opened. There was no force, no kicked-in lock. The person used a key. Ian walked into the frame. He looked hurried. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, glancing over his shoulder even though he was inside. He didn't call out my name. He didn't look for me. He walked straight to the vintage mahogany display cabinet in the corner, the one where I kept the few things that belonged to me and only me. He knew exactly which drawer to open. I watched, feeling a sensation like ice water being poured down my spine, as my brother reached into the velvet-lined drawer and pulled out a small, gold object. Grandpa's pocket watch. It was a 1927 Elgin, solid gold, with an inscription on the back that read, "Time waiteth for no man." It was the only thing our grandfather had left when he died. He hadn't left it to our father. He had left it to me, specifically, because I used to sit on his knee and wind it for him. It was valued at maybe $5,000, but to me, it was the only physical proof that I came from a lineage that didn't abandon its children. On the screen, Ian didn't pause to admire it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look guilty. He shoved the watch into the front pocket of his jeans, patted it to make sure it was secure, and turned around. He walked out the door and locked it behind him. The video ended. I sat there, frozen. The silence in the hotel room felt deafening. This wasn't borrowing money. This wasn't charging a dinner to a card. This was theft. He had used the spare key I gave him for emergencies to enter my home while I was at work and steal my most chaotic sentimental possession. And he had done it with the casual efficiency of someone who believed he was entitled to harvest anything I owned. My phone rang. It was Elias. I picked it up, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like clarity. "I assume you watched it," Elias said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and devoid of pity. "I watched it," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, metallic. "He pawned it or he sold it," Elias said. "Or he's holding it. But Nina, that is grand larceny. He entered your primary residence and removed property. We are past the point of enabling. We are in criminal territory." "He needed money for the wedding," I said. It wasn't a defense. It was a statement of fact. "He maxed out the credit limit I gave him, so he liquidated my assets." "Nina," Elias said, and for the first time, there was a note of urgency in his tone. "You have been protecting him from the consequences of his own mediocrity for a decade, but he just robbed you, literally. Is it time to activate the exit strategy?" I didn't answer immediately. I looked away from the laptop and back to the iPad. The live stream was still going. The speeches were over. The dancing had begun. The camera was tracking Ian and Savannah as they moved across the dance floor. They were swaying to some slow, acoustic cover of a pop song. Ian had his hand on Savannah's waist. He raised his left hand to brush a lock of hair from her face. The light from the Edison bulbs caught something on his wrist. He wasn't wearing a wristwatch. He was wearing a vest, and attached to the buttonhole of the vest, draped elegantly into the pocket, was a gold chain. As he spun Savannah, the object in his pocket swung out slightly. It was gold. It was round. It was unmistakably the 1927 Elgin. He hadn't pawned it. He hadn't sold it for quick cash. He was wearing it. He had stolen my grandfather's watch, my inheritance, to wear as a prop in his perfect wedding. He was using my history to accessorize the event where he was publicly erasing me. He was literally wearing a piece of my heart while his wife told the world I was toxic. The audacity was breathtaking. It was absolute. It was the final proof that Ian did not see me as a human being. He saw me as a warehouse, a vault he could crack whenever he wanted to look the part of a successful man. "Nina?" Elias asked on the line. "Are you there?" I looked at the red text on the spreadsheet. Asset Recovery Protocol. For 10 years, I had treated Ian as a liability I could manage. I thought if I just poured enough capital into the hole, I could stabilize the structure. But you cannot stabilize a sinkhole. You can only fence it off before it swallows the entire house. I watched Ian laugh on the screen, fingering the gold chain of the watch he had stolen from my living room. "Do it," I said. "Do what?" Elias asked, though I knew he was already opening his own files. "Activate the protocol," I said. "Everything. The house, the truck, the cards, and the watch. I want all of it back." "This goes nuclear." "Nina," Elias warned. "Once we file the motions, there is no unringing the bell. He will be on the street. He will be liable for tax fraud if we recategorize the support. Are you sure?" I looked at the smile on Savannah's face as she hugged my brother, the brother who was currently wearing stolen goods. "He said he wanted a life without my control," I said, my voice steady and sharp. "I am just giving the happy couple exactly what they asked for." "I'll draft the motions tonight," Elias said. "We execute on Monday." "No," I said. "Execute now. Start the paperwork. I want the eviction notice ready before they cut the cake." I hung up the phone. I turned back to the laptop. I clicked on the cell containing the red text. I changed the font color to black. Then I changed the status in column F from pending to active. It was no longer a family tragedy. It was a liquidation event. And I was the only one in the room who knew how to count the cost. Turbulence at 30,000 feet is usually something that puts me to sleep. I have flown enough miles for Northwind freight systems to circumnavigate the globe 10 times. And the shudder of a Boeing chassis usually feels like a rocking chair. But on the flight back to Denver that Wednesday morning, every drop in air pressure felt like the floor dropping out of my stomach. I had not slept. The hotel coffee was burning a hole in my stomach lining. I was running on adrenaline and a terrifying, cold sort of clarity that I thought was anger. Then my phone, which I had just reconnected to the cellular network upon landing, vibrated with a notification that shattered that clarity into a million shards of panic. It was a link from our public relations manager, a woman named Sarah, who usually only emailed me about charity galas or LinkedIn thought leadership pieces. The subject line was simply, "Urgent, flagged content." I clicked it. It opened TikTok. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 200,000 views. Savannah was sitting on a plush white bed, presumably in the honeymoon suite I had paid for indirectly through Ian's credit card. She was wearing a silk robe that slipped just enough off one shoulder to look vulnerable. Her eyes were red-rimmed, devoid of makeup. It was the raw confession aesthetic that influencers used when they needed to weaponize pity. "Hey guys," she whispered, wiping away a non-existent tear. "I didn't want to post this. I really didn't. I wanted our honeymoon to be about love, but I feel like I owe you an explanation for why yesterday was so heavy." She took a deep, shaky breath. "You guys know about the boundaries we set, about not inviting toxic family. But I didn't tell you the whole story. I didn't tell you that Ian's sister, let's call her N, promised us 6 months ago that she would cover half the wedding costs. She looked us in the eye and promised. We built our budget around that promise." Liar. The words screamed in my head. I had never promised a dime. I had told Ian explicitly that a destination wedding was a bad financial decision. "Then," Savannah continued, her voice breaking, 3 days before the wedding, she pulled it all, every cent, just to punish us, just because Ian wouldn't let her control the guest list. She tried to bankrupt us on our wedding day to teach us a lesson." I felt the blood drain from my face. the passenger next to me, a businessman in a gray suit, glanced at me, concerned by my sudden pallor. And the scariest part? Savannah looked directly into the camera, her eyes hardening. She does this for a living. She manages money. She manages risk. She is the chief risk officer at Northwind Freight Systems here in Denver. And I just think, if someone can be this unethical with their own family, if someone can lie and manipulate finances just to hurt people, how can they be trusted to manage millions of dollars for a major company? It's just scary. Anyway, I love you guys. Thanks for listening. The video ended. I sat there, paralyzed. She had named the company. She had named my title. She had drawn a direct line between a domestic fabrication and my professional integrity. I scrolled down to the comments. User 88. Northwind Freight Systems? Good to know who not to do business with. Slay Queen 22. Just left a 1-star review on their Google page. We got you. Girl? Anticorp Dardan. Imagine being a C-suite exec and bullying your baby brother. Typical corporate psychopath behavior. Justice. Sav. Everyone go tag Northwind. Get her fired. My chest constricted. I switched apps to Google Maps and searched for my own company. Northwind Freight Systems. Average rating, 1.2 stars. In the last 4 hours, we had received over 500 1-star reviews. The comments were a copy-paste barrage of toxic leadership, unethical practices, and fire Nina Valdez. My phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name that made my hands shake uncontrollably. Graham Holloway, CEO. Graham was a man who spoke in bullet points and viewed emotions as inefficiencies. He was currently negotiating a merger with a European logistics giant, a deal worth $400 million. We were in the final stages of due diligence. Every document, every asset, every liability was being scrutinized under a microscope. And I had just become a liability. Nina, Graham said. There was no greeting. His voice was tight, like a violin string stretched to the breaking point. I am looking at a report from our social media team. Why is the Northwind brand trending on Twitter alongside the hashtag #ToxicSister? Graham, I can explain, I stammered, stumbling out of the plane into the jet bridge. It's a personal matter. My brother's wife, she's creating a narrative that isn't true. I don't care if it's true. Graham cut me off. The harshness of his tone was physically painful. I care about the merger. The Europeans are looking for any excuse to renegotiate the valuation. If they think our chief risk officer is involved in financial coercion or fraud, even personal fraud, it gives them leverage. It's not fraud. It's a lie, I shouted, causing a flight attendant to glare at me. I lowered my voice to a desperate hiss. She is lying, Graham. I have records. Then fix it, Graham said coldly. I don't care how. Pay them off. Apologize. Get a retraction. But if this story is still cycling in 24 hours, the board is going to ask for a personnel review. We cannot have this kind of noise during closing week. Do you understand me? Graham, please. Quietly, Nina. Make it go away. The line went dead. I walked through the terminal in a daze. The familiar noise of the airport, the rolling suitcases, the announcements, the chatter, sounded distant and underwater. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare where the monsters were wearing the faces of strangers on the internet. I took an Uber home. I didn't even check the price. I just needed to be behind a locked door. My kitchen was exactly as I had left it, pristine and silent. The stainless steel appliances gleamed. The marble island was empty. This was the house I had bought with the bonuses from the job I was about to lose. I collapsed onto a bar stool. My phone was burning a hole in my hand. The notification badge on the TikTok app showed 99+. My LinkedIn was being bombarded with hate mail. My professional reputation, built over 12 years of 16-hour days and flawless audits, was being dismantled by a girl in a silk robe who had never worked a corporate day in her life. Graham's voice echoed in my head. Pay them off. Make it go away. It was the old reflex, the muscle memory of trauma. When Ian made a mess, I cleaned it up, When Ian broke something, I bought a new one. When Ian screamed, I soothed. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Ian's name. If I called him now, if I transferred $10,000 to his account, if I sent an email apologizing for the misunderstanding and begging them to take the video down, maybe it would stop. Maybe Graham would calm down. Maybe I could save the merger. Sure, it would mean admitting to a lie. It would mean accepting the role of the villain forever. It would mean they won. But at least I would still have my job. At least I would still be safe. My thumb hovered over the call button. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the device. The tears were finally coming, hot and humiliating. I felt small. I felt like the 20-year-old girl in the hospital hallway, terrified of failing her mother. Just call him, the voice in my head whispered. Just surrender. It's what you do. The front door unlocked with a sharp click. I jumped, nearly dropping the phone. Mia Rodriguez walked in. Mia was my executive assistant, but that title didn't cover half of what she was. She was my gatekeeper, my scheduler, and the only person who knew that I drank almond milk because regular dairy gave me migraines. She had a key because she often dropped off files or picked up my dry cleaning when I was stuck in meetings. She froze in the doorway, a stack of mail in her hand. She took in the scene instantly. Me, pale and shaking on the bar stool, tears streaming down my face, my thumb hovering over Ian's contact on the screen. Mia didn't say hello. She dropped the mail on the counter with a heavy thud. She walked over to me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. "Don't you dare," she said. Her voice was low and dangerous. "Mia, you don't understand," I choked out, wiping my face frantically. "The company. Graham called. They're destroying Northwind's rating. The merger. I have to stop it." "So you're going to call him?" Mia asked, pointing at the phone. "You're going to negotiate with a terrorist?" "I have to fix it," I cried, the desperation spilling out. "I can't lose this job. It's all I have. If I apologize, maybe Savannah will take the video down." Mia reached out and snatched the phone from my hand. "Hey," I protested, reaching for it. Mia slammed the phone face down on the marble island. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Listen to me, Nina," she said, leaning in, her dark eyes blazing. "I have worked for you for 5 years. I have watched you stare down auditors from the IRS. I have watched you negotiate insurance premiums that saved this company $2 million a quarter. You are the scariest woman I know when you are in a boardroom." "This isn't a boardroom," I whispered. "This is my family." "No," Mia corrected me. "This is a hostile takeover, and you are letting them win because you think you owe them something." She walked around the island and grabbed my shoulders. Her grip was firm, grounding. "You manage risk for a living," Mia said, enunciating every word. "You identify threats, you calculate exposure, and you neutralize them. That is what you do. That is who you are." She shook me slightly. "But right now, you are letting yourself be blackmailed by guilt. You are letting a thief and a liar destroy your life because you promised a dead woman you would be nice." The mention of my mother hit me like a physical blow. "Graham wants it fixed," Mia said. "Fine, but you don't fix a blackmailer by paying them. You fix them by destroying their leverage." She picked up the phone and held it out to me, but she didn't let go of it. "You have a file," Mia said. "I know you do. I've seen you working on it late at night when you think everyone has gone home. The Excel sheet." I stared at her. "How did you—" "I'm your assistant, Nina. I know everything," she said. "Stop being the big sister. Stop being the victim. Apply your skills to your own life. Treat Ian like a vendor who breached contract. Treat Savannah like a competitor who committed libel. Stop crying and start calculating." She let go of the phone. I looked at the black screen. I looked at the reflection of my own face in the glass. Red eyes, messy hair, a woman on the verge of total collapse. Treat Ian like a vendor who breached contract. The words settled in my brain. They reconfigured the chaos. If a vendor stole company property, lied to the press, and sabotaged a merger, I wouldn't call them to apologize. I wouldn't offer them a settlement. I would crush them. I would use every clause in the contract to bury them in litigation. I would freeze their accounts. I would audit their history. I would make sure they never worked in this town again. The panic in my chest didn't disappear, but it changed state. It cooled. It solidified. It turned into ice. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I sat up straighter. "You're right," I said. My voice was raspy, but it wasn't shaking anymore. "I know I'm right," Mia said, crossing her arms. "So, what is the plan, boss?" I reached for the phone. I didn't call Ian. I unlocked it and opened the email app. I found the draft I had started with Elias, the one with the subject line, "Execution of Asset Recovery." "Graham wants a quiet resolution," I said, thinking out loud. "He won't get quiet, but he will get decisive." I looked at Mia. "Get the whiteboard from the study," I said, "and put on a pot of coffee, the strong stuff. We are going to war." Mia smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "On it." As she walked away, I looked down at the notification from TikTok. Another comment had just popped up. User 44. Silence speaks volumes. She knows she's guilty. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Silence is just the sound of the predator aiming." I opened the laptop. I didn't feel like a sister anymore. I felt like the chief risk officer, and I had a deficit to correct. The whiteboard in my home office is usually reserved for supply chain schematics, flowcharts tracing shipping containers from Shenzhen to Long Beach. But that afternoon, the blue marker fumes filled the room as Mia and I mapped out a different kind of logistics network. We weren't tracking cargo. We were tracking leverage. On the left side of the board, I wrote Ian and Savannah. On the right, I wrote Nina. Between us, I drew lines representing every financial artery I had kept open for the last decade. The lease, the truck, the credit cards, the insurance premiums, the legal fees, the emergency cash transfers. Step back and look at the ocean, and it's just blue water. But look at the chart, and you see the currents. For years, I had viewed myself as a small, golden fish, a goldfish, swimming nervously around a shark. Ian was the shark. He was unpredictable, dangerous, always hungry, and capable of biting the hand that fed him. I spent my life dodging his teeth, dropping flakes of food to keep him satisfied so he wouldn't turn on me. I looked at the board. I looked at the sheer volume of assets titled in my name. I wasn't the goldfish. I was the great white. I was the apex predator who had been deluding herself into thinking she was prey. Ian wasn't a shark. He was a remora, one of those parasitic suckerfish that attaches itself to a larger host to eat the scraps. He didn't hunt. He didn't kill. He just rode my slipstream. And the thing about remoras, they die the second the host decides to scrape them off against a reef. "Okay," I said, uncapping the red marker. "Let's bring in the heavy artillery." I opened my laptop and patched Elias in via secure video link. He appeared on the screen, sitting in his office with a wall of leather-bound law books behind him. He didn't look like a man worried about a TikTok scandal. He looked like a man preparing to foreclose on a soul. "Elias," I said, pointing the webcam at the whiteboard. "We are moving from damage control to asset liquidation. I need a 3-tier strategy." "I'm listening," Elias said, leaning forward. "Tier 1, I said, drawing a circle around the physical assets. "Immediate recovery. The lease on the loft is month to month under the LLC. Terminate it. The truck is company fleet property. Repossess it. The authorized user status on the Amex. Revoke it." "Standard," Elias nodded. "We can have the eviction notice served within 48 hours of their return. The truck we can pick up at the airport." "Tier 2, I continued, and this was where the air in the room changed. "The IRS. Mia looked up from her notepad. "The IRS? "Ian has been living on my net income for a decade," I said, my voice dropping to the cool, analytical register I used for board meetings. "I have paid his rent. I have paid his debts. I have paid his settlements. I have treated these as gifts because I am his sister." "But," Elias interrupted, a slow smile spreading across his face, If we reclassify those payments, specifically the ones where there was an expectation of repayment or where he acknowledged a debt, then they aren't gifts, I finished. They are loans, and if I choose not to sue him for the money, but instead choose to forgive the debt because he is insolvent. Cancellation of debt, Elias said. Form 1099-C. Exactly, I said. In the eyes of the Internal Revenue Service, forgiven debt is considered taxable income. If I forgive, let's say, $200,000 of cumulative debt, Ian doesn't owe me the money anymore. He owes the IRS income tax on $200,000. Mia let out a low whistle. He doesn't have $200,000. He doesn't have $2,000. The IRS doesn't care about your vibes, I said. They don't care about toxic families. They garnish wages. They place liens. They audit until you bleed. To make this stick, Elias said, his lawyer brain engaging fully. We need paper. We need proof that the current spending, this honeymoon, this wedding, is definitively his liability that you are generously covering, not a gift you promised. That brings us to Tier 3, I said. The trap. I erased a section of the whiteboard and wrote, Operation Low Tide. Why low tide? Mia asked. Warren Buffett, I replied. Only when the tide goes out do you discover who has been swimming naked. We are going to drain the water. I turned to the credit card section of the board. Logic dictates I should cut the card immediately, I said. Stop the bleeding. Save the money. But, Elias prompted. But if I cut the card now, they play the victim. They say I stranded them. They say I broke a promise. I said, I need them to dig the hole deeper. I need them to confirm, in writing, that they are spending my money on personal luxury, fully aware that I do not approve. I pulled up the American Express portal on my laptop. I am not cutting the card, I said. I am increasing the limit to $50,000. Mia stared at me. Are you insane? They are already burning through $5,000 a day. Let them burn 10, I said. I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel like they won. And I want them to create a paper trail of excess so undeniable that no auditor in the world would believe it was a misunderstanding. I opened my email client. I started typing. I am going to send an email, I explained. I am going to sound weak. I am going to sound beaten. I am going to beg them to stop the social media attacks in exchange for letting them finish their trip in peace. You're baiting them, Elias noted. I am negotiating a confession, I corrected. I typed the subject line. Please, let's just stop this. The body of the email was a masterclass in feigned submission. Ian. Savannah. I saw the video. Please, I am begging you. My job is on the line. Graham is threatening to fire me. I can't handle this pressure. I don't want to fight anymore. I see the charges coming through on the Amex. I won't cancel the card. I increase the limit so you don't get declined. Just, please enjoy the honeymoon. Spend what you need to spend. Just please, stop posting about me. I can't take it. I'll figure out the money later. Just promise me you'll stop hurting my reputation. Your sister, Nina. I read it aloud. It's pathetic, Mia said, looking disgusted. I hate it. Good, I said. If you hate it, Ian will love it. It confirms everything he thinks about me. That I am weak, that I need him to like me, and that money is my only way of apologizing. If they reply, Elias said, and they accept the offer to keep spending in exchange for silence, they are acknowledging the transaction. They are acknowledging that the spending is theirs to control. And when you eventually hit them with the 1099-C, you have proof that they knowingly consumed the capital. My finger hovered over the enter key. For a second, the shark metaphor dissolved. I saw my mother's face. I saw her in that hospital bed. Her skin gray, her eyes pleading. Take care of him. The guilt hit me like a rogue wave. Was this taking care of him? Bankrupting him? Sicking the federal government on him? Was I betraying the only person who had ever loved me unconditionally? I closed my eyes. I thought about the definition of care. If you have a patient with gangrene in their leg, you do not care for them by putting a bandage on it and giving them sugar. You care for them by amputating the limb before the infection reaches the heart. My mother asked me to ensure he survived. She didn't ask me to let him eat me alive. If she were here, if she saw the thief in my living room, if she saw the lies on TikTok, she would be the one handing me the knife. To honor her, I had to survive. To honor her, I had to stop being the victim she left behind. I opened my eyes. The hesitation evaporated. "Elias, draft the eviction notice," I said. "Mia, monitor the transaction log. As soon as they reply, we document every cent." I looked at the email one last time. It was a surrender flag that was actually a target marker. "Send," I said. I clicked the button. "God, you're terrifying," Mia whispered, but she was grinning. "I'm just a risk officer," I said, leaning back in my chair, watching the message sent notification fade away. "And I just adjusted the premiums." The water was calm now. The bait was in the water. Now, we just had to wait for the remora to bite. The reply from my brother arrived 4 minutes after I sent my surrender email. It was faster than he had ever responded to a job offer or a student loan overdue notice. The subject line was simply, "Please, let's just stop this." I opened it, expecting perhaps a shred of gratitude, maybe a generic, "Thanks, sis." Instead, what stared back at me was the triumphant crowing of a man who believed he had just stared down a tyrant and won. "Glad you finally decided to act like family. Nina, it is sad that it took a public shaming for you to respect our boundaries, but Savannah and I are willing to forgive you. We will keep the card for emergencies and the honeymoon expenses, as agreed. Don't worry about the receipts. We are handling the logistics. Just focus on fixing your energy." I read it twice, fixing my energy. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that bounced off the walls of my home office. He was lecturing me on energy while I was literally underwriting the electricity charging his phone. He didn't just reply to me, though. A moment later, my phone lit up with an Instagram notification. Ian had screenshotted my email, selectively cropping out the part where I begged for my job, leaving only the part where I promised to pay, and sent it to Savannah. She posted it to her story immediately. The background was a blurred photo of them holding hands. The text overlaid in a trendy, minimalist serif font read, "When you finally stand firm on your boundaries, the universe shifts, the toxicity breaks, they are forced to respect you." Breaking cycles. Manifesting, peace family, healing. She had turned my calculated entrapment into a spiritual victory. To her 50,000 followers, I wasn't a sister being extorted. I was a demon that had been exorcised by the power of her self-love. Then, the notifications from American Express began to chime. It started like a trickle, then it became a deluge. Ping, merchant, the Oregon Cliffside Resort. Amount, $4,200. I switched tabs on my laptop to the spreadsheet. Exit strategy Ian, XLSX. My fingers moved with the muscle memory of a pianist playing a funeral march. Column A, date, today. Column B, merchant, Oregon Cliffside Resort. Column C, description, room upgrade, Panorama Valley View Suite, 7 nights. Column D, classification, personal luxury, non-essential. I imagined them at the front desk, Ian, slapping the heavy platinum card onto the marble counter, telling the concierge they wanted the best room available because they were celebrating a victory. He probably felt like a king. He probably didn't even look at the total. Ping, merchant, Vine and Vow. Private tours. Amount, $850. I typed, private wine tasting. I pulled up Savannah's Instagram. There it was. A video of her and Ian clinking glasses of Pinot Noir with 3 other couples, random influencers they had met at the venue, people they were desperate to impress. "Cheers to abundance," Savannah chirped in the video, tossing her hair back. "We decided to treat our new friends because energy is meant to be shared." I typed, treating strangers to alcohol. Classification, personal. Ping, merchant, Lorazone, fine dining. Amount, $1,300. Ping, merchant, Helios helicopter charters. Amount, $2,500. I paused at that one. $2,500 for a 45-minute ride. I clicked on Savannah's profile again. She was live streaming from the helicopter headset. The noise of the rotors was deafening in the video, cutting through the silence of my office. "You guys!" she screamed over the engine noise, panning the camera down to the lush green valley below. "This is what happens when you stop settling. This is the life we are building. Look at this view." Ian was giving a thumbs up in the background, looking like he owned the chopper. I looked at the spreadsheet. The running total for the last 6 hours was approaching $9,000. $9,000. That was the cost of a used Honda Civic. That was 6 months of rent for a struggling family. That was the deductible on the heart surgery that killed our mother. And they had burned it in an afternoon to prove a point to the internet. Mia walked into the office, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She stopped behind my chair and looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide. "Please tell me that is a typo," she said, pointing to the sum at the bottom of the column. "No typo," I said, my voice flat. "Helicopter tour." Mia made a noise that was somewhere between a gag and a growl. "Nina, that is more than my sister makes in 3 months. You have to stop this. You have enough proof. This is obscene." "It is not enough," I said, typing in the helicopter charge. "To the IRS, a few $1,000s is a mistake, a few $1,000s is a misunderstanding, but 20,000, 30,000, that is income. That is a deliberate lifestyle subsidy." "They are going to max out the card by Friday at this rate," Mia said, watching the numbers climb. "Good," I said. "Let them hit the ceiling. Let them bruise their heads on it." My computer chimed with an incoming video call request. It was Elias. I accepted. His face appeared, pixelated slightly by the connection. He looked tired. "I am monitoring the transaction log from my end." "Nina," Elias said, skipping the pleasantries, "I feel obligated as your counsel to inform you that you have sufficient evidence to establish a pattern of misuse. We can file the theft report and the civil suit now. You do not need to let them buy a vineyard to prove they are greedy." "I am not proving they are greedy." "Elias," I said, taking the mug of coffee Mia handed me, "I am building a tax bracket." "This is getting into sadism," Elias said, though his tone was more impressed than critical. "You are letting them dig a hole so deep, they will need a ladder from NASA to get out." "They wanted a lifestyle," I said. "I am just letting them buy it, at retail price plus interest and penalties." "Fine," Elias sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But just be aware, if they spend this money, you are on the hook for it initially. You have to pay Amex. You only get it back if the court orders restitution. And we both know Ian has no assets to seize. You are effectively setting $50,000 on fire to watch them choke on the smoke." "It is an investment," I said. "The return on investment is my freedom, and the destruction of their credibility, that is worth $50,000 to me." "Understood," Elias said. "I will keep the eviction paperwork dated for their return. Do not blink. Nina." "I never blink," I said. I disconnected the call. I went back to the spreadsheet. The rhythmic clack of my mechanical keyboard was the only sound in the room. Item, date, amount, category. It was hypnotic. It was soothing. It was the only thing keeping me from screaming. Then, a notification popped up that made my fingers freeze over the keys. Ping, merchant, Denver Horizon Studios. Amount, $5,000. Note, deposit, production retainer. I frowned. They were in Oregon. Why were they charging a deposit for a studio in Denver? I opened a new tab and searched for Denver Horizon Studios. It was a high-end production facility, the kind used for commercial shoots and television pilots. I pulled up the transaction details on the Amex portal. There was a user note attached to the charge, entered by Ian at the point of sale, probably over the phone. User note, deposit for the Blake Method series, Season 1. I stared at the screen. The Blake method. They weren't just enjoying a honeymoon. They were planning a career. They were going to come back to Denver and film a reality series or a vlog course about their successful marriage and their method for cutting out toxicity. They were using my money to rent a studio to film content where they would likely talk about how terrible I was. They were building a business model based on my villainy, funded by my own credit line. "Mia," I said quietly, "look at this." Mia leaned in. She read the note. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You have got to be kidding me. They are starting a show? About what? How to be parasites?" "They think they are famous now," I said. "The TikTok went viral. They think they can monetize the drama." "Block it," Mia said instantly. "Call Amex. Mark it as fraud. Do not let them book a studio on your dime to film trash about you." My hand moved to the phone. It was the logical thing to do. Stop the bleeding. Cut the cord. But then I thought about the sandcastle metaphor. When you build a sandcastle, the most satisfying way to destroy it isn't to kick it over when it is small. It is to let the builder work for hours. Let them build the towers. Let them dig the moat. Let them stand back and admire their masterpiece, believing it is permanent. And then you let the tide come in. If I blocked the charge now, they would have a new grievance. Nina sabotaged our business. Nina crushed our dream. They would be martyrs. But if I let them book the studio, if I let them hire the crew, if I let them announce the project to their fans, and then I evicted them, and then I handed them a tax bill for $100,000, and then I seized the equipment and the footage as collateral. That wasn't just stopping them. That was humiliation. That was a lesson they would feel in their marrow. "No," I said, moving my hand away from the phone. "Let it go through." "Nina," Mia warned, "that is $5,000. It is the down payment on their public embarrassment," I said. "Let them build it. I want them to announce it. I want them to tell the world they have a show coming. I want them to be so high up that when I pull the rug, they don't just fall, they shatter." I typed the entry into the spreadsheet. Merchant, Denver Horizon Studios. Amount, $5,000. Classification, business investment, unauthorized. The sun had gone down outside. My office was dark. Save for the blue glow of the monitors, I felt a deep exhaustion settling into my bones. But my mind was wired, electric with the hum of vengeance. I looked at the corner of the screen where Savannah's Instagram story was still cycling. She was holding a glass of champagne, toasting the camera. "To the future," she shouted. "It is only going to get better from here." I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My face was pale, my eyes shadowed. I didn't look like a winner. I looked like a ghost. But ghosts are dangerous because they have nothing left to lose. "To the future," I whispered back to the screen. I saved the file. Exit Strategy Ian, XLSX, was now 5 pages long. I turned off the monitor. The room plunged into darkness. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house I had paid for, waiting for the bill to finally come due. The tinted windows of the gray Ford Focus rental car offered a view of the world that felt like looking through a pair of cheap sunglasses. I was parked on the 4th level of the Denver International Airport parking structure, nestled between a minivan and a dusty pickup truck. I was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a hoodie I had bought at a gas station an hour ago. For the first time in 10 years, I was not Nina Valdez, the chief risk officer. I was just a spectator in the cheap seats, waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. I saw them emerge from the sliding glass doors of the terminal. They looked like royalty returning from exile, or at least, that was the image they were projecting. Ian was pushing a cart stacked high with 4 Rimowa suitcases, luggage that cost more than my first semester of college tuition. He was wearing a linen shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, despite the biting 40-degree Denver chill. Savannah walked beside him, oversized sunglasses shielding her eyes, her face buried in her phone. She was checking the engagement metrics on her latest post, no doubt feeding on the dopamine of likes and comments that were still trashing my reputation. They walked with the specific, arrogant stride of people who believe they have beaten the system. They thought they had secured their funding, humiliated their enemy, and were returning to their kingdom to film their reality show. They approached the premium parking row. This was where Ian always parked the Thunder Cruiser. He liked the spot because it was close to the elevator and had extra width for the truck's massive frame. I watched through the windshield as they stopped. The spot was empty. Ian stopped the luggage cart. He looked left. He looked right. He pulled the key fob from his pocket and pressed the panic button, expecting the horn to blare and the lights to flash. Silence. Nothing happened. Just the wind whistling through the concrete pillars of the garage. I saw Ian's mouth move. "Dude, where is it?" Savannah looked up from her phone, annoyed. She gestured to the empty space with a manicured hand. I could see the tension in her shoulders. This was a deviation from the script. Her perfect return vlog was supposed to start with them hopping into their $90,000 electric beast, not standing confused in a freezing parking garage. "Maybe you parked on the 3rd level?" I imagined her saying. Ian shook his head. He was frantic now, pacing back and forth. He pressed the button on the fob again and again, harder each time, as if brute force could materialize the vehicle out of thin air. A white security SUV rolled up the aisle slowly. It was airport security, but not the police. Just a guy in a high-vis vest doing his rounds. Ian waved him down aggressively. The officer stopped and rolled down the window. I cracked my own window just a fraction of an inch, enough to let the sound in. The air smelled of jet fuel and exhaust. "Officer!" Ian shouted, pointing at the empty spot. "My truck. It was right here. Someone stole my truck. It's a black Thunder Cruiser. License plate Blake 1. The officer looked at his tablet. He tapped the screen a few times, his face bored and impassive. He wasn't looking at Ian. He was looking at a database. "Blake 1, the officer read. "Black EV pickup, registered to Northwind Fleet Services." "Yeah, that's my company car," Ian lied. "It's gone." "It's not stolen, sir," the officer said, his voice flat and professional. "We have a log here. It was recovered 3 days ago by the owner. Northwind Fleet Management came with a tow order and a spare key. They said the authorized driver status was revoked." Ian froze. "What?" Savannah screeched. She pulled her sunglasses down. "That is impossible. My husband owns that truck." "I am just reading the log." "Ma'am," the officer said. "Vehicle was repossessed by the title holder. If you have a dispute, you need to call Northwind." The officer rolled up his window and drove off, the tires squeaking on the polished concrete. Ian stood there, the key fob dangling uselessly from his hand. He looked like a child who had just been told Santa Claus had died. The reality was hitting him, but he couldn't process it. Repossessed. That word didn't belong in his vocabulary. Then, he moved. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Inside my rental car, the phone on the passenger seat lit up. Incoming call. Ian. I looked at the screen. The name pulsed in bright white letters. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles were white. Every instinct I had nurtured for 20 years screamed at me to answer. Pick it up. Tell him it's a mistake. Tell him you will fix it. Send an Uber. Don't let him be cold. But I didn't reach for the phone. I watched it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. The ringing stopped. The screen went dark. In the parking lot, Ian pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at it in disbelief. He shoved it back into his pocket and turned to Savannah. She was already filming him, or maybe herself, holding the phone up to capture the drama. "We have to Uber," Ian said, his shoulders slumping. They loaded the 4 massive Rimowa suitcases into the trunk of a battered Toyota Camry that arrived 5 minutes later. It was a tight squeeze. Savannah had to sit in the back with a carry-on bag on her lap. The last image I had of them at the airport was Savannah's face pressed against the glass, looking miserable, as the beat-up sedan merged into traffic. I started my engine. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where they were going, and I knew exactly what was waiting for them. 40 minutes later, the Uber pulled up to the curb of the Lodo Loft building. It was a renovated warehouse with a brick facade and heavy iron doors, the kind of building that screamed gentrified money. I was already there, parked across the street in a loading zone, observing from a safe distance. Ian and Savannah tumbled out of the car. They left the driver to unload the bags on the sidewalk. They looked exhausted. The high of the honeymoon had evaporated, replaced by the gritty irritation of travel and the shock of the missing truck. They walked up to the main entrance. Ian pulled out his wallet and retrieved the keycard. It was a sleek, black square of plastic. He tapped it against the reader. Usually, the light would turn green, and the heavy mag lock would disengage with a satisfying clunk. This time, the light flashed red. Beep, beep, beep. Ian frowned. He wiped the card on his shirt and tapped it again. Beep, 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 red. He tried a third time, slamming it against the reader. Savannah sighed loudly, her breath visible in the cold air. Ian, come on. It's freezing. Just call the desk. Ian pressed the intercom button. Yeah, hey, this is Ian Blake in 4B, he said into the speaker. My key isn't working. Can you buzz us in? There was a pause. Then, the heavy iron door didn't buzz. It opened manually. A man stepped out. It was David, the head concierge. David was a man I had tipped $500 every Christmas for the last 5 years. He was discreet, professional, and loyal to the person who signed the checks. He didn't hold the door open for them to enter. He stood in the doorway, blocking the path. Mr. Blake, David said. He was holding a large manila envelope. Welcome back. David, hey, Ian said, trying to push past him. Something is wrong with the scanner. We have a ton of bags. David didn't move. He held out the envelope. The scanner is working perfectly, sir, David said. Your access credentials have been deactivated. What? Ian stopped. What are you talking about? This is for you, David said, pressing the envelope into Ian's chest. It is a notice from the building management and the leaseholder, Valdez Holdings, LLC. Ian ripped the envelope open. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the eviction notice Elias had drafted. I couldn't read the words from across the street, but I knew them by heart. Notice of termination of guest occupancy. Effective date. Immediate. Personal effects have been removed to secure storage at the following address. This is a joke, Ian stammered. My sister owns this place. I live here. Ms. Valdez owns the unit. David corrected him gently but firmly. You are listed as a guest. She has formally revoked your guest privileges. As of noon today, the locks have been changed. You can't do this, Savannah screamed. She pushed past Ian, getting right in David's face. We have rights. We have tenancy rights. This is an illegal eviction. Actually, ma'am, David said, taking a small step back but not yielding the doorway. Since you have never paid rent, and there is no lease in your name, you are considered a guest at will, and the will has expired. Also, you are causing a disturbance. He pointed up. Above the door, the security camera was blinking with a steady red eye. We are filming everything, David said. If you do not remove your belongings from the sidewalk and vacate the premises, I am instructed to call the police for trespassing. Savannah looked at the camera. For a second, I thought she was going to perform for it. I thought she would launch into a monologue about victimhood, but then she looked at the mountain of luggage on the curb. She looked at the closed door. She looked at the cold, indifferent brick of the building. She realized this wasn't content. This was homelessness. Ian, she shrieked, turning on him. Fix this! Call her! Ian was already dialing. He was shaking. Whether from the cold or the panic, I couldn't tell. In my home office, 5 miles away, I knew exactly what was happening. I had driven home after the airport scene, leaving the rental car for Mia to return. I was sitting at my kitchen island, a glass of water in front of me. My phone was face down on the marble counter. Next to it was a document Elias had couriered over an hour ago. Draft, Internal Revenue Service, Form 1099-C, Debt Forgiveness Disclosure, Debtor, Ian Blake, Amount, $482,000. The phone began to vibrate against the marble. It made a harsh, buzzing sound, like a trapped insect. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I stared at the back of the phone case. I pictured Ian on the sidewalk. I pictured the confusion in his eyes. He had spent his whole life believing that no matter how far he fell, there would be a soft landing waiting for him, because I would be there to catch him. He thought the safety net was woven into the fabric of the universe. He didn't understand that the net was woven from my nervous system, and I had finally cut the threads. I reached out. I didn't pick up the phone. I pressed the volume button on the side until the buzzing stopped. Silence returned to the kitchen. I walked to the sliding glass door and stepped out onto the balcony. The air in Denver is thin and sharp. It fills your lungs like ice. I took a deep breath. I looked towards the city center. Somewhere down there, amidst the glittering lights of the skyline, my brother and his wife were standing on a sidewalk with 4 suitcases and nowhere to go. I imagined Savannah calling her mother. I imagined the tears, the hysteria, the narrative spinning. She kicked us out. She is a monster. Let them say it. Let them scream it. I wasn't a monster. I was a bank that had finally closed its doors. I went back inside and locked the balcony door. I sat down at the table and picked up a pen. I looked at the IRS draft. This was the next wall. The car was gone. The house was gone. Now, we were coming for the future. I signed the cover letter authorizing Elias to file the form. It was done. The first domino had fallen, but the chain reaction was just beginning. The Super 8 motel on Colfax Avenue smelled of stale cigarette smoke and despair. A sharp contrast to the lavender-scented air of the panorama suite they had been sleeping in 48 hours ago. I knew they were there because the transaction alert for the room deposit had come through on the American Express card. 5 minutes before I finally suspended the account, it was the last mercy I granted them. A roof over their heads for 3 nights, paid for by the sister they had just publicly disowned. I sat in my office at Northwind, the glass walls insulating me from the bustle of the trading floor. My phone lay face up on the desk. It was vibrating so constantly that it was slowly inching its way across the polished wood surface. Ian was calling, again. I did not answer. I watched the screen light up with his name, a name that used to trigger an immediate, biological reflex in me to fix, to help, to save. Now, it just looked like a notification from a debt collector. The blow had landed exactly as Elias had predicted, but with a force that even I had not fully anticipated. Earlier that morning, Elias had sent the email. It was not a personal note. It was a formal legal dispatch sent to the email address Ian used for his business ventures. Attached was a PDF of IRS Form 1099-C, cancellation of debt. I had spent the last 2 nights with Mia and Elias, categorizing every single dollar I had spent on Ian since he was 18. We didn't just list the big things. We went granular: the tuition, the bail money from his DUI, the loans for his 3 failed startups, the rent for the loft, the car payments for the Thunder Cruiser, and, of course, the $52,000 they had burned through in their single week of manifesting abundance in Oregon. The grand total was staggering: $512,480. In the eyes of the law, I was no longer a generous sister giving gifts. I was a creditor who had decided that the debt was uncollectible. I was writing it off, and by writing it off, I was transferring the liability. I imagined the scene in that cramped motel room. I imagined Ian reading the number, his brain refusing to comprehend the magnitude of it. He probably thought it was just a statement, a scorecard. He probably thought he could just delete it. But Savannah would know better. I knew from my background checks that before she was an influencer, Savannah had worked 2 tax seasons as an administrative assistant at a budget tax preparation firm. She knew just enough to be terrified. She would look at that form. She would see the box marked Date of Cancellation. She would see the code G for Decision to Discontinue Collection. And she would realize that the Internal Revenue Service now considered that $500,000 to be taxable income for the current fiscal year. They didn't owe me money. They owed the United States government income tax on $500,000 they didn't have. My phone stopped ringing for a moment, then pinged with a text, then another, then a string of them. Ian. Nina? Is this real? Ian. You can't do this. This is fraud. Ian. Call me. Now? Ian. Savannah is freaking out. You are ruining our lives. Ian. Please. I'll take the video down. Just cancel the form. Ian. Pick up the phone. The capitalized letters screamed at me. I could feel his panic radiating through the network. It was the panic of a child who realizes the safety glass has been removed and the tiger is actually in the room. Mia walked in, carrying a tablet. She stood by my desk and looked down at my phone, which was buzzing again. He is persistent, Mia noted, her voice devoid of sympathy. He thinks this is a negotiation, I said, staring at the screen. He thinks if he cries loud enough, I will call Elias and tell him it was all a mistake. He thinks I can just hit undo on the federal tax code. Can you? Mia asked, testing me. Technically, maybe, I said. If I admitted I lied, if I admitted I filed a false return, then I would go to prison for tax fraud instead of him. I looked up at her. I am not going to prison for him, I said. Not anymore. Mia nodded, satisfied. She placed the tablet in front of me. You should see this. The tide is turning. She had pulled up a local Denver news site. The headline read, Viral toxic sister drama takes legal turn. Documents reveal $500,000 support history. Elias had been busy. He hadn't just filed the tax forms. He had released a limited statement to the press to correct the record regarding the accusations of financial abuse. He hadn't released the tax form itself. That was private. But he had released the summary of support and, crucially, the emails. The article quoted the email I had sent Ian, the one where I begged them to stop, and the one where Ian replied claiming the expenses were theirs. The document suggests that contrary to the allegations of financial control, Ms. Valdez has provided over $500,000 in unreciprocated support over a decade. The article read, Furthermore, text messages appear to show the couple claiming ownership of the spending they later decried as manipulation. I scrolled down to the comments section. The internet is a fickle beast. The same mob that wanted my head on a pike 2 days ago was now turning on the new villains. Commenter 1. Wait, she paid for his whole life and he sued her on TikTok? Commenter 2. I wish I had a toxic sister who gave me a free loft and a truck. Commenter 3. The audacity of this guy. And the wife knowing about it? Grifters. Graham saw it, Mia said. He is in the boardroom with the European partners. And? I asked, my stomach tightening. He showed them the article, Mia said. He told them, This is the kind of ruthless efficiency our chief risk officer brings to the table. She protects the asset. The Germans loved it. They called you a pragmatic operator. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A pragmatic operator. A gentle shark. I had saved my career by skinning my brother alive. The phone started ringing again. This time, I didn't just watch it. I picked it up. Mia took a step forward, her hand raising as if to stop me. Nina. I'm not answering, I said. I'm ending it. I pressed the side buttons to silence the call. Then, I unlocked the screen. I didn't open the messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I went straight to the settings. Block caller. I did the same for Savannah. Then I opened the security app for the house. I disabled the guest codes. I set the perimeter alarm to instant trigger. If I answer, I told Mia, my voice steady but quiet. He will use the voice, the one he used when Mom died, the one that sounds like he is 6 years old and afraid of the dark. And if I hear that voice, I might break. So I'm making sure I never hear it again. Mia looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was something bordering on fear. You really are different. I am just tired, I said. I am tired of being the only adult in the room. In the Motel 6 on the edge of town, the reality was setting in with the weight of a collapsing building. Ian was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the laptop screen. The email from Elias had a second attachment. It was a digital folder containing every single receipt. "You said she was bluffing," Savannah whispered. She was standing by the window, peering through the blinds at the parking lot, as if she expected the IRS to pull up in black SUVs right then. "You said she never follows through." "She doesn't!" Ian shouted, throwing his hands up. "She always caves. She always feels bad. I just need to talk to her." "She blocked you, Ian?" Savannah turned, her face blotchy from crying. These weren't the pretty single-tear cries she used for her videos. These were ugly, snot-nosed, terrified tears. "Do you understand what this is? This isn't a family fight. This is the government. We owe tax on $500,000. That is $150,000 in cash. We have $300 in the checking account." "We can fight it," Ian stammered. "We can tell them it was a gift. Gifts aren't taxable." "Read the email, you idiot," Savannah screamed, pointing at the screen. "Your lawyer sister kept the receipts, and she has the texts. The texts where you said, 'We are handling the logistics.' The texts where you said, 'This is our money.' You admitted it was income. You walked right into it." She paced the small room, tripping over a suitcase. "My credit score is going to be 0, she sobbed. "They will garnish my wages. I can't be an influencer with a tax lien. Brands will drop me. Oh my God. The studio deposit, that $5,000, we don't even have that anymore. It is gone." Ian looked at the phone in his hand. The screen was dark. He had called 40 times. "She has to fix this," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "She promised Mom. She promised she would take care of me." "She is taking care of you," Savannah said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "She is taking care of you exactly like we asked. We told everyone she used money to control us, so she stopped. Now nobody is controlling us. We are free, and we are going to jail." A heavy knock on the door made them both jump. Ian looked at Savannah. Savannah looked at the door. "Room service?" Ian whispered hopefully. "We didn't order room service," Savannah hissed. Ian walked to the door. He opened it slowly. It wasn't room service. It was a process server. A large man in a windbreaker holding a thick envelope. "Ian Blake?" the man asked. "Yeah," Ian breathed. "You have been served," the man said, shoving the envelope into Ian's hand. "This is a courtesy copy of the filing from the district court regarding the eviction and the debt validation notice. The originals have been filed." The man turned and walked away. Ian closed the door. He opened the envelope. Inside was the physical copy of the tax form, printed on official paper, along with a letter from Elias Monroe's firm formally notifying him that any further contact with Nina Valdez would be considered harassment and met with a restraining order. Ian slid down the door until he hit the floor. He held the paper in his hands. "She really did it," he whispered. "She actually did it." Savannah snatched the paper from him. She read the bottom line, the tax estimate, $160,000 due immediately upon filing. She didn't scream this time. She just sat on the bed and put her head in her hands. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of two people who had spent their lives playing a game they didn't understand, against an opponent they had severely underestimated. Outside, the neon sign of the motel buzzed and flickered. Inside, the power couple brand was dead. All that was left were two broke 20-somethings and a bill that would take a lifetime to pay. Back in my office, I closed the laptop. I picked up my purse. I walked out past the trading floor, past the reception desk. "Good night, Ms. Valdez," the security guard said. "Good night, Robert," I said. I walked out into the cool Denver night. I was alone. I had no brother to call. I had no wedding to go to. I had no one to cook for. But for the first time in 20 years, when I took a breath, my chest expanded fully. There was no weight. There was no crushing pressure. I walked to my car, got in, and drove home. Not to a crisis, not to a rescue mission, just home. The security footage from the lobby of the Elodo Loft building played on my laptop screen in high definition. It was silent, black and white, and brutally clear. I watched it not as a sister, but as an auditor reviewing evidence of a perimeter breach. The timestamp in the corner read 8:15 in the evening. Ian was shouting. I knew he was shouting because his mouth was wide open, the tendons in his neck straining against the collar of his linen shirt. He was pounding on the heavy glass of the front door with both fists. David, the concierge, stood on the other side, his posture rigid and unmoving, phone to his ear. On the screen, Ian looked deranged. The expensive tan suit from the honeymoon was wrinkled and stained. His hair, usually styled perfectly, was wild. He kicked the door. He threw his shoulder against the frame. He was trying to break into a life that no longer belonged to him. Then, the blue lights flashed against the glass. 2 officers stepped into the frame. They didn't ask questions. They saw a man violently attempting to force entry into a secure building. They grabbed his arms. Ian spun around, trying to shake them off, pointing a finger at David, probably screaming that he lived there, that he was an owner, that this was a mistake. The officers spun him back. One of them swept Ian's legs. My brother hit the pavement hard. I watched as they pulled his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. A small, dull flare of light on the screen. They hauled him up. He looked small between them. He looked like exactly what he was, a desperate man with no assets and no control. I paused the video. I closed the window. I filed it under a folder named Incident Reports. 3 hours later, the phone on my desk rang. It was not a cell number. It was a restricted line. I picked it up. This is a collect call from the Denver County Detention Center, a robotic female voice announced, from an inmate named Ian. The recording of his name was shaky. He sounded terrified. To accept the charges, press 1. I sat there for a long moment. My finger hovered over the keypad. For 20 years, I had accepted the charges. I had accepted the late fees. I had accepted the emotional toll. I had accepted the role of the safety net. I pressed 1. Nina! Ian's voice exploded into my ear. It was high-pitched, cracking with hysteria. Oh my God. Nina, you have to get me out. It is a nightmare in here. It smells like urine. There are guys in here looking at me. Please, you have to come down here. Bring cash. The bail is $2,000. Just come get me. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize for the theft. He didn't apologize for the TikTok video. He just issued a command, assuming the command would be obeyed because it always had been. Ian, I said. My voice was calm. It sounded like the voice I used when firing a vendor for non-compliance. Nina, please, stop with the cold act, he sobbed. I am in jail. I am your brother. Mom made you promise. You promised you would take care of me. There it was, the trump card, the invocation of the dead. I am taking care of you, I said. I am teaching you how the law works. You trespassed. You assaulted a security guard. That has consequences. I didn't assault him. I just pushed him, Ian screamed. Nina, please, I am scared. I will do anything. I will pay you back. I swear. You have no money to pay me back, I said. You have a negative net worth and a tax bill for $160,000 heading your way. I will fix it. I will get a job. Just get me out of here tonight. I looked at the notepad on my desk. I had already spoken to Elias. The paperwork was ready. I will post your bail, I said. Ian let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh, thank God. Thank God. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't leave me here. When will you be here? I am not coming, I said. What? I am sending Elias, I told him. And he is bringing a document. It is a binding settlement agreement. What kind of agreement? Ian's voice wavered. You will sign a confession of judgment, I explained, speaking slowly so the words would sink in through his panic. You will formally acknowledge that every dollar I spent on you for the last 10 years was income, not a gift. You will accept full liability for the tax debt, and you will sign a permanent non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak my name, the name of my company, or the name of our family in public again. You will not text me. You will not call me. You will not come within 5 miles of my home or my office. Nina, that is insane, he whispered. You are banning me from your life? I am mitigating my risk, I said. If you sign, Elias posts the bail. If you do not sign, you stay in that cell until your arraignment on Monday. And since you have no fixed address and are a flight risk, the judge might not let you out even then. You can't do this, he cried. I am your brother. That is the only reason I'm offering bail at all, I said. Goodbye, Ian. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking slightly, not from sadness, but from the adrenaline of severing a limb. It was the phantom pain of cutting off a part of myself that had been gangrenous for a decade. The rest of the night was relayed to me by Elias. He arrived at the detention center at 2 a.m. He wore his charcoal suit and carried his leather briefcase. He met Ian in the consultation room. Ian was a wreck. He had been crying for hours. His eyes were swollen shut. He smelled of sweat and fear. When Elias placed the document on the metal table, Ian pushed it away. He begged Elias to call me again. He begged Elias to reason with me. She is not answering. Ian, Elias told him, unscrewing a fountain pen. This is the offer. It expires in 10 minutes. If you don't sign, I walk out that door, and you go back to the holding cell with the guys you were worried about. Ian looked at the pen. He looked at the door. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly that Elias had to hold the paper steady. Ian signed his name, Ian Blake. With that signature, he legally absolved me of a lifetime of guilt. He admitted that he was a debtor, not a victim. He sold his access to me for $2,000 in bail money. Is she here? Ian asked after he signed, looking at the door with a pathetic kind of hope. Is she waiting in the car? Elias put the document in his briefcase. He snapped the lock shut. The sound echoed in the concrete room. No, Elias said. But where is she? Ian asked, a fresh tear tracking through the grime on his face. She is at home, Elias said. She is living her life, a life that no longer includes you. Elias posted the bail. He gave Ian a voucher for a taxi. He didn't offer him a ride. The final blow, however, did not come from me. It came from the woman who had started it all. I had wondered where Savannah was. She hadn't been at the loft when the police arrived. She hadn't called me. It turned out she was waiting outside the detention center gates. When Ian walked out at 4 a.m, shivering in the pre-dawn cold, holding his release papers in a plastic bag, he saw her. She was standing next to an Uber, her arms crossed, wearing a heavy coat and sunglasses despite the darkness. Ian ran to her. I can imagine the relief he felt. He thought she was his safe harbor. He thought they were still the team that was going to take on the world. He reached out to hug her. She stepped back. She didn't hug him. She reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope. What is this? Ian asked, his voice hoarse. It is a legal separation notice, Savannah said. Her voice was clipped. It was the voice she used when she was unhappy with customer service. My mom's lawyer drafted it an hour ago. Separation? Ian stared at her. We have been married for 2 weeks. This isn't what I signed up for. Ian, Savannah said. I signed up for abundance. I signed up for breaking cycles. I didn't sign up for tax fraud. I didn't sign up for a husband with a criminal record. I did this for us, Ian screamed. I stood up to her for you. You lied to me, Savannah corrected him. You said she was controlling you, but she wasn't. She was funding you, and now the money is gone, and you have this heavy negative energy attached to you. I can't have that in my brand. I can't have that in my life. Where am I supposed to go? Ian asked. He looked around the empty street. I have no home. I have no money. I can't call Nina. That is something you need to figure out on your own journey, Savannah said. She opened the door of the Uber. She got in. She didn't look back. The car drove away, leaving Ian standing alone on the sidewalk under the buzzing sodium streetlights. He had no truck. He had no loft. He had no wife. He had no sister. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and the freedom he had claimed he wanted. At 6 a.m, my phone chimed. It was a text from Elias, a photo of the signature page. Subject: executed. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee. The sun was coming up over the Rockies, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the hidden folder. Exit Strategy Ian, XLSX. I scrolled to the very bottom of the document. Row 542. I typed in the final entry. Date: today. Action: settlement agreement, signed. Status: executed. I didn't feel happy. Happiness is a light emotion. What I felt was heavy and solid, like the feeling of setting down a backpack you have been carrying for 20 miles. I looked at the cell where I had tracked the debt. I highlighted the entire column. I right-clicked, delete. The numbers vanished. I didn't need to track it anymore. The debt wasn't mine to carry. It belonged to the IRS now. It belonged to Ian. I saved the file. Then, I dragged the file to the recycle bin. I emptied the bin. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was waking up. People were going to work. Trucks were delivering goods. The complex machinery of the world was churning, managing risk, calculating loss, moving forward. For the first time in my life, I was just another part of that machinery. I wasn't a savior. I wasn't a victim. I was free. The boardroom on the 45th floor of the Northwind headquarters was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of glass and polished steel, suspended above the Denver skyline, where the air was thin and the stakes were usually measured in 9 figures. 6 months had passed since the merger with the European logistics giant began, and today was the final hurdle. The ink was dry on the contracts, but the partners in Zurich had one final condition. They wanted the reputational noise silenced. They were talking about Savannah. Despite the legal separation and Ian's confession, the old clips were still floating in the digital ether. Algorithms are zombie makers. They keep dead controversies alive. A video of Savannah crying about my abuse had resurfaced on a repost account, gaining traction in Europe. The partners wanted a clean slate. They convened an independent ethics hearing to officially close the file on Nina Valdez. I sat at the head of the mahogany table. To my right sat Graham, our CEO. To my left, Elias Monroe. Across from us sat 3 representatives from the European Ethics Committee. And at the far end of the table, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, sat Savannah. She was not wearing her signature beige linen. She was wearing a conservative navy suit that looked like it had been bought off the rack at a department store sale. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired. The separation from Ian had destroyed her power couple brand, and the looming tax debt had evidently forced her into a reality she could not filter away. This hearing is to determine if the chief risk officer engaged in conduct detrimental to the firm, the lead auditor said. His accent was thick, his tone bored. Ms. Cole, you have publicly stated that Ms. Valdez used corporate assets to manipulate family dynamics. Do you stand by this? Savannah shifted in her chair. She looked at the camera recording the proceedings. I was speaking my truth, she said, her voice shaking slightly. At the time, I felt that the financial dynamic was energetic abuse. Elias didn't even look up from his notes. He simply pressed a button on the console in front of him. 3 massive screens on the wall flickered to life. On the left screen, the wedding livestream played. Savannah was holding a microphone, her eyes bright with malice, implying I was a toxic controller. On the middle screen, the TikTok video played. Savannah was in the bathrobe, naming Northwind Freight Systems, explicitly linking my job performance to her personal grievance. On the right screen, Elias projected a spreadsheet. It wasn't the exit strategy file. It was a forensic audit of the corporate credit card. Ms. Cole, Elias said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. On screen right, we see a charge for $5,000 to Denver Horizon Studios. The user note says, The Blake Method Series. Was this a corporate expense for Northwind? No, Savannah whispered. Was it a personal project intended to monetize the defamation of my client? Elias asked. It was just a content idea, Savannah stammered. We were just brainstorming. And the helicopter tour? Elias continued. $2,500. Was that energetic abuse, or was that a joyride funded by the woman you were actively slandering? Savannah looked at the screens. She looked at the image of herself from 6 months ago. Arrogant, glowing, untouchable. Then she looked at the spreadsheet, the cold, hard math that proved she was a thief. The contrast was brutal. It was a dissection of a lie in real time. I didn't know, Savannah tried, tears welling up. Ian told me it was his money. I was misled. My media team told me to post those things to get engagement. You are the media team, Ms. Cole, Graham interrupted. He leaned forward. His patience evaporated. You are a sole proprietor. You recorded the video. You edited it. You tagged my company. You risked a $400 million merger for likes. That is not a misunderstanding. That is actionable libel. The room went silent. The lead auditor looked at the screens, then at Savannah. He closed his folder. The position of the committee is clear, he said. The ethical breach lies with the accuser, not the employee. However, the continued existence of these claims is a liability. He turned to Savannah. Ms. Cole, Northwind is prepared to file a civil suit for damages against you personally for defamation and tortious interference. The damages are estimated at $3 million. Savannah gasped. She gripped the edge of the table. I don't have $3 million. I can't even pay my rent. Then you will issue a correction, the auditor said. Today, in this building, under our supervision, you will admit that your statements were false. You will clarify that Ms. Valdez provided support, not abuse. You will apologize to Northwind, and you will scrub your entire digital footprint of any reference to this family. Savannah looked at me. For the first time, I looked directly at her. I didn't see a villain anymore. I saw a girl who had bet her entire life on a filter and lost. She nodded. Okay, I will do it. An hour later, I sat alone in my office. The blinds were drawn. On my monitor, a new video file was playing. It was Savannah. She was sitting against a plain gray wall in one of our conference rooms. The lighting was harsh. There was no music, no ring light. Hi, everyone, she said. Her voice was flat. I am making this video to correct the record. Over the last 6 months, I posted statements about Nina Valdez and Northwind Freight Systems that were untrue. Nina never promised to pay for my wedding. She never used money to control me. In fact, she provided financial support that I misused. I apologized to her and to the company for the damage I caused. The video ended. It wasn't a triumph. It wasn't a moment of fist-pumping glory. It was just quiet. It was the silence of a machine that had finally stopped grinding gears. There was a knock on my door. Graham walked in. He didn't smile, but his shoulders were relaxed. The partners are satisfied, Graham said. The video is live. The lawyers are scrubbing the reposts as we speak. Thank you, Graham, I said. We are announcing the new structure on Monday, Graham said. The Group Chief Risk Officer role. It covers the North American and European operations. It is yours if you want it. I looked at the nameplate on my desk, Nina Valdez. I want it, I said. Good, Graham nodded. You handled this well, Nina. Most people would have screamed. You used leverage. That is what we need at the top. He left the room. I sat there for a moment longer. I thought about Ian. I hadn't heard from him in 6 months. The last I heard from a mutual acquaintance. He was working as a bartender in a college town 2 hours away, living in a studio apartment, slowly paying off his IRS payment plan. He was finally living the life he could afford. I packed my bag. I walked out of the office, down the elevator, and into the parking garage. On the drive home, I took a different route. I wasn't going to the big house in the suburbs. I had sold it. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I had bought a penthouse in the city. Smaller, sharper, with a view of the mountains. I turned down a side street in a neighborhood I used to visit when I was broke. I saw the flashing neon sign of a pawn shop, gold and silver exchange. I felt a pull in my chest. I parked the car. I walked into the shop. It smelled of dust and old electronics. Behind the glass counter, rows of abandoned treasures sat waiting for owners who would never come back. And there it was. In the corner of the display case, looking tarnished and sad, the 1927 Elgin pocket watch. Ian had pawned it the day after he stole it. He hadn't just worn it to the wedding. He had cashed it in the moment the honeymoon ended and the bills started piling up. He had sold our grandfather for $300. "Can I help you?" the pawnbroker asked. He was a heavy man with grease under his fingernails. "That watch," I said, pointing. "I would like to buy it." "Nice piece," he grunted, unlocking the cabinet. "Solid gold, vintage, $800. Ian had sold it for $300. I was buying it back for $800. I pulled out my wallet. I pulled out my own debit card. Money I had earned. Money that belonged to no one but me. "Wrap it up," I said. "This used to belong to a kid," the broker said, making conversation as he polished the glass face. "Came in here crying, said he was waiting on a big check from his sister, said he was good for it." I smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile. It was the smile of someone who recognizes a story they used to tell themselves. "It belongs to my family," I said. "But the debt? That doesn't belong to me anymore." I took the small velvet bag. I walked out into the cool evening air. I drove to my new apartment. It was modern, clean, and empty of clutter. I walked to the living room wall. I took a small hammer and a nail. I hung the watch on the wall, right next to the window overlooking the city lights. It ticked softly, tick, tick, tick. It wasn't counting down to a crisis anymore. It was just marking time. My time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email. From the Valdez Scholarship Fund. Subject: Recipient Selection. Dear Ms. Valdez, we have selected the first recipient for your endowment. Her name is Elena. She is 20 years old, working 2 jobs to support her younger brother after their parents passed. She wants to study finance. Your donation will cover her full tuition. I looked at the email. I looked at the watch. I hadn't stopped being a sister. I hadn't stopped being a helper. I had just stopped investing in a sinkhole and started investing in a foundation. I was giving this girl the one thing I never had, a chance to be successful without being a martyr. I typed a quick reply. Approved. Tell her she doesn't owe anyone anything. Tell her to study hard. I put the phone down. I walked out onto the balcony. The wind was cold, but I didn't shiver. My brother had a wedding and didn't invite me because his wife didn't want me there. So I dismantled their illusion. I reclaimed my life, and finally, after 34 years, I chose myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Nina and her rise from a goldfish to a shark. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop your country or city in the comments below, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please consider subscribing to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.